Hey, what's up? Husman here, and today we're gonna talk about EQ. I'm gonna go a bit nerdy with frequencies and all that kind of good stuff. But first, I want to show you my new toy. Here it is, the Magneto, and it's the really awesome black thing here. I will move the cables a little bit for you. What it basically is, it's a tape delay, it's also reverb, it's an echo device, it's a looper. As you can see, there are four tape heads which you can individually tweak and give it a little bit more different kind of speed, different kind of height and stuff. Here you have the speed and the pitch knob where you can manipulate the whole tape delay. You have some spring reverb, some wow flutter effects, some low cuts, tape age, a lot of things where you can different stuff into, which I've not explored yet. I've got here a melody, a trance melody. If I pull it up. So here it is dry and then increasing the wet. Add some reverb. And then you can manually adjust all sort of elements. You can even remove all the dry signal coming in and just use the wet signal. Let's add some effects to this. And then we can even go crazier and just change the pitch and the speed of it. So, fellow producers, today we're going to talk about EQ. I got a really nifty trick to help you improve your EQ, your mix down, especially on your high frequencies, your mid-high frequencies. But before we go a little bit deeper into that trick itself, I think it's important to take a step back and talk a bit about what EQ actually is. When we're talking about EQ, we're actually talking about an equalizer, and we're actually going to play around with frequencies, be it the low frequencies, which we know as like the bass lines, or the high frequencies, which we know like the synth lines, the cymbals, the rides, the hi-hat, drums, you name it. All of these sounds are in a certain frequency range. Now, the basic function of an EQ is actually increasing or decreasing certain frequencies, so to make room for other frequencies or to bring certain frequencies of a sound more forward. Now, the first question that I always had when thinking about EQs was like, what kind of frequencies can we actually hear? Now, I looked it up, and as a generalization, the frequency range that we as humans can actually hear is between 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz. Quite a wide gap. 20 Hz, of course, being the lowest ones, and 20,000 Hz all the way up on the highest frequency range. The frequencies below 20 Hz are called infrasound, and the frequencies above 20,000 Hz are called ultrasound. As of now, we can't hear those yet. Maybe in like 10 years we got some bionic kind of sci-fi stuff in our ears where we can actually hear those sounds and perhaps revolutionize music, how we like feel music and how we interpret music. But for now, stick with 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz, and that's also a little segue into where I always cut my master tracks. I always cut my tracks around those frequency ranges because basically we can't hear them anyway, so why keep those frequency range? Actually, there's a much more important reason for that, is that even though we can't hear those frequencies above and below that certain range that I gave of 20 and 20,000 Hz, those frequencies are still there. Now, what does this mean? That was the first thing that I asked my teacher at school. Now, they're there, but I can't hear them, so should I worry about them? as it turns out, you should worry about them because even though you can't hear them, when our computer is converting our music into WAV files and MP3 files, our converter system inside our computer is trying to analyze all the frequencies in a sound file. Now, actually, I've been trying to figure out a way of explaining to you guys professionally what this is actually doing. I'm honestly having some troubles with it, but I found a really great article which I've linked below, which really explains what the converter in our digital audio workstations are actually doing, what aliasing means, what the Nyquist frequency is actually doing, and everything about sample rates. And I was thinking about trying to explain it alongside this article, but I was just butchering everything. So basically, how I would try to explain it to you guys as producer to producer, like what I know and what I would like to explain to you guys, is that frequencies that we can't hear doesn't mean that they're not there. And if we just gonna export our music without cutting off those frequencies, they will be crawling back into our mix, and then we'll create some distortion and artifacts on certain frequencies that we already have, which we cannot control in the end. So I would highly suggest look up that article, because those guys who wrote it are much more capable of explaining it to you. Also got a really cool video with it, so shout out to them. But you know me by now, I really like to give you tips on things you can actually use in your own production. So today we're gonna talk about the 3K dip, and I've thought of that name myself. Yeah, thought it was quite a cool name for it. Now, what is the 3K dip? Now, we've talked about which frequencies our ears can really translate into audio. Now, there's a specific range of frequencies which our ears are really sensitive to. What do you think it is? I doubt you would think, just like me, like for instance, like low frequencies or high frequencies, because if we get some hearing loss, we will probably lose first the low or the high frequencies. Actually, that's not the case. The frequency range between 2000 and 5000 Hertz is where our ears are the most sensitive to. Now, should that always be like where always the cool stuff is happening, like electric guitars, bass lines, super saws? Those are the frequency range where those are really being brought forward in the mix. So throughout the years when producing trance music, I've always noticed like trance music is kind of harsh. And for instance, like uplifting music, also my own music, I always noticed it was kind of harsh, but every time I put like a high cut on it, I would lose a lot of information. So I was looking up on the internet, and then I found between 2 and 5000 Hertz that there was the culprit, there were the issues happening. So to bring all this yada 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 into the practical world, I have here a trancey kind of lead layer, and this will how it sounds without EQing. I think the leads themselves already work together, but it's still too harsh in my opinion. So what we're gonna do, we're actually gonna do like a subtle cut around 3K. We're gonna make it a little bit more wider, so it really spans around between 2 and 5K Hertz, and then 3K is where the peak or like the dip is happening. So we're just gonna decrease that around 2 dB, 2.5 dB, and this will result in a much more pleasing mix. And this is, I think, much more pleasing, and it sounds much more professional as well. And that's something that I always strive to, that it sounds professional, that all the sounds are really playing where they should be playing in the frequency range and the spectrum. So the same thing goes for guitars. I have here a little guitar loop. Now again, without the 3K dip, it sounds like this. But if we decrease that slightly, we'll get a much more pleasing mix to the ears. And I think that's much more soothing when we have the grand scheme of things. If you have to add some bass lines, some kicks, we have just a little bit more clarity and less harshness in that place of the mix. And this will be especially good for all the people that come to your gigs, that you're not blowing their eardrums out with those harsh frequencies. So I really hope this tip helped you, and I hope it gave you a little bit better understanding into what an EQ is doing and what we as humans can actually hear, which kind of frequency range. A little bit of nerdiness in this tutorial. Now again, if you want to learn a bit more about the technical side of what frequencies are doing, check the link below, because I think it's a really wonderful article. Now, should you want to help your old mate Husman out, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and maybe maybe you could also hit the bell so you'll be notified for the next video, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Take care. Bye bye.